How are we doing, Cedarbrook? Yes, so good, so good. Hey, my name is James Brown. I serve you as one of your pastors here, and if you're new with us, I just want to welcome you. So glad that you are here. In fact, you showed up on a super awesome Sunday because we are wrapping up this teaching series called The Secret Sauce, right? And each week of this series, I've been trying to introduce, at the beginning of the message, some sauce that holds a special place in my heart. And so as we are moving together like on a runaway train to the midterm elections in November, there's already been a ton of talk about political surveys and polls, specifically favorability polls. So in the spirit of controversy and division, as we close this series today, I would like to host our own favorability poll regarding this specific sauce. Cranberry sauce. Cranberry sauce. I didn't actually realize until I started looking at this that there's multiple kinds of cranberry sauce. You've got whole berry and jellied as well. Who knew about that? So I want to take a survey. I want to see where the Christians are and the non-Christians are today. Just kidding. By show of hands, how many of you are a fan of cranberry sauce? Who loves the cranberry sauce? Oh, very good, very good. I'm going to give you some cranberry sauce here, sir. Yes, because you need some emotional healing. Now, how many of you are the Christians? Do not like cranberry sauce? Yeah, a lot of us as well. I'm with you, okay? I'm not even sure why they call it sauce. In fact, this is what the jellied version comes out like. It's not actually sauce. This stuff is garbage, which is a total shame to me because it is associated with my favorite holiday, On what day do families across this nation traditionally pull out the cranberry sauce? On Thanksgiving Day, right, Thanksgiving. I love Turkey Day, but I hate that stuff. I love Thanksgiving, but I hate cranberry sauce. Which is interesting because that is the exact same situation that we're going to see today as we wrap up this series. There's going to be a day of Thanksgiving that we're going to see. There's going to be a day of celebration, of party, a family dinner. But at the same time, there's going to be a hater and a whole lot of hate present at that meal as well. Now, what we're about to experience is a moment of great gratitude that is paired with something that has the potential to leave a bitter or bad taste in your mouth, like cranberry sauce does. So if you have a Bible, I want to invite you to open it up. If you have an Bible app, open it up with me to Luke chapter 15. Because in this chapter, if you're new, maybe this is your first week of this series, let me just bring you up to speed a little bit. Because this chapter starts with a series of short stories. The first story is about a lost sheep, and then Jesus follows up telling another story that's about a lost coin. And then the third story begins with Jesus telling about a younger son who says to his father, "Dad, I want my share of the inheritance," which essentially is a first century way of saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead." This request would not have happened in the first century context. But in this thoroughly strange story, Jesus tells us that the father, for whatever reason, decides to grant this completely offensive request. And in doing so, the son takes the money and he heads off to a foreign land. He heads off to a far country and he blows it all. He blows the whole amount. And then in that moment of when he's destitute, he realizes that he'd actually be better off if he were back home again as a servant in his dad's house. It would be better than the situation that he finds himself in. So he decides to return home. And so his father sees him coming up the driveway, which I added that. There was no driveways then. But he sees him going up the driveway, and his father runs to him, which a first century Jewish patriarch would never, ever do. Totes undignified. Nevertheless, the father runs to his son, and he welcomes him home. And then he announces that there will be a great feast. And so he directs one of his servants to kill the fattened calf. Now, in those days, you wouldn't just kill a fattened calf. A lamb would be fine to feed a whole family. A fattened calf, on the other hand, pun intended, that would actually feed 100 people or so, which was the same size as a village in this day. So when he says kill the fattened calf, essentially this beast is for a feast that is meant for the entire surrounding area. The father hopes to offset the consequences of his son's departure, which were significant enough to impact the entire community. Now, if you start in verse 1 of Luke 15 and you start reading through these three stories, you might conclude that what I just talked about would be the logical endpoint of this parable, because it's the exact same spot that the other two stories end as well. Let me review. Maybe you remember. The ending of story number 1, the lost sheep, ends like this. Verse 5 says, and when he finds the sheep, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. And then story number 2, the lost silver coin, ends this way. And when she finds the coin, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin. And then the ending of story number 3 sounds like it should be the lost son, verse 22. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Now, this is the exact same story 3 times. It's the same exact thing every single time. And the pattern is this. Something is lost, something is found, the community is called, and now it's time to party. It's time to party, right? Same pattern in every one of these stories. Something is lost, something is found, the community is called, and now it's time to throw a party. So I'm imagining this scenario as Jesus gets to the end of the younger son's story, and I can almost picture him giving this crowd this dramatic pause, because what he just said was the obvious end. This is supposed to be where the story stops. But then, taking a deep breath, he begins to launch into this story's surprise ending. Now look at verse 25. Verse 25 says, meanwhile, which in the original language was in a world. Like that's how it should be hearing. Da-da-da, because the scene fades to black, and then slowly it fades in as an image of a figure starts walking toward the house. But who is it? Who is this person? It is the older son. Oh yeah, I totally forgot about this guy. He was there the whole time. There's 2 sons in this story. There's the younger son and the older son. There's son number 1, and there's also son number 2. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always been sort of fascinated by the birth order dynamics and the studies that surround that. It's amazing to me as I read through this story that Jesus is talking about just how dead-on accurate Jesus' parable is psychologically. Because in this story, there's the younger child, and we've looked at him in previous weeks of this series. And as is often the case, this kid in this story is a free spirit. He's a party waiting to happen. He loves the limelight. He loves when people pay attention to him. He wants to be the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral. That's the younger kid. He can light up a room when he wants to be charming. And truth be told, though, he's kind of spoiled. He's a little immature. He's kind of entitled. He's kind of impulsive. He's pretty good at getting what he wants. I'm the baby. Gotta love me is kind of his mantra. The baby in the family, researchers say that's just the way they are. How many of you are the youngest? How many babies? A lot of babies. Good, good. Then in the story, we're also introduced to the firstborn, the older brother, and you know this boy well as well. He's the one that follows the rules. He walks the line. He colors inside the lines. He makes his bed. He cleans his room. He gets good grades. He's a perfectionist. He's an achiever. He's a role model. But he's also kind of bossy. I imagine that when they were younger, this older brother kind of had a way of making his little brother feel small, inadequate. People admired him from a distance. But truth be told, people didn't really like being around this guy all the time. He was kind of judgy. He was kind of proud. He was the firstborn. And researchers say that's just the way they are. How many of you are the oldest firstborn in the family? A lot of us as well. I'm in that camp. Now, I think it's important, though, to notice that there's not a middle child in this story. And I wonder if it's because the researchers also say that the middle children tend to be the healthiest and most well-adjusted children in the family. Yeah, I don't think so. Who are my middle kids in the house? Middle kids. Oh, good. Yeah, good. Just so you know, we will have people up here after the service to pray for your soul. So your struggle is real. Now, there's an older son and a younger son. And knowing older kids, it's no surprise then why he shows up where he shows up in this story. Because he's been working the whole time. Look at verse 25 again. It says, "Meanwhile, the older son was where? In the field." In the field. Of course he was in the field. He's the responsible one. And since the younger son's been gone, he's been picking up the younger brother's slack. His younger brother has abandoned all his farm work. So he's doing it. And now that the workday is over, he heads back toward the house. And it says, "And when he came near the house, he heard music and he heard dancing." Now, since he is able to hear the sound of music and dancing from a long way off, that means that there's a pretty good party going on, right? There's probably some Avicii-esque DJ who knows how to get people's booty shaking on the dance floor, teeing up tunes and cranking out the hits, everything from the electric slide. Oh, yeah. Also, the YMCA is probably happening, and the cha-cha slide. Everybody clap your hands. Okay, you're going to leave me hanging. All right, fair enough. He's walking up and he's hearing all of this stuff. Verse 26, the older brother is walking up. He hears Footloose blaring from inside the house. So he calls one of the servants and he asks, "What is going on?" In verse 27, "Your brother's come home." The servant replied, "Your father has killed the fattened calf because he now has him back safe and sound." And in that moment, hearing Footloose, something in that older son broke loose that had been locked away and hidden from sight. Because hearing this news caused something sinister to begin bubbling up in him. Sinister began bubbling out of him, bubbling over the surface of his emotions. Something erupted in him. Something that he had kept hidden for a long, long time. Verse 28 tells us what? The older brother became angry. And as a result, he refused to go in. And this anger that this older brother has is a very specific kind of anger. It's a self-righteous anger. And that's the kind of anger that doesn't have anger toward a problem, but rather it's the kind of anger that has anger toward a person or a group of people. And of all the people that are in this story, this older brother is the one that I relate to the most. And maybe you do as well, because there's different areas at which we can shoot our angry thoughts and our angry intentions. And the reality is some of you have, as you look at your workplace, the younger brothers that are there that may be passing you by, passing you up, and you are angry not at what your plight is, but at them for what they've done to you, and you feel justified in that anger. This righteous anger has shown up, this self-righteous anger has shown up a ton when it comes to politics. That as we stand on the right or we stand on the left and look across the aisle and shoot our anger not at a problem but at a person or a people, we feel justified in that anger toward them because they're wrong and we're right. I mean, maybe even for some of you, you have people in your own family, younger brothers. They may be younger, they may be older. And your parents continue to go to bat for them. They continue to write checks to them. They continue to kill the fattened calf for them while you're out in the field working the whole time. And as a result, you shoot your anger not at that problem, but at that person. At that person. And you feel justified in that. because you're right and you did it right the whole time. And maybe you are right in that. Maybe you are. This older brother thought he was right. I mean, that's the reason that when it comes to this party, he's like, yeah, I'm out. I don't want any part of this party. Everybody else wants to celebrate my little brother's return home, and that's fine, but not me. I'm not going to do it this way. I'm not going to give him that. This older brother has gone all cranberry sauce. He's bitter. He's angry. He's resentful. And as a result, he refuses to celebrate. He's not going into the party. He can't go into the party. Why? Because he's the one who saw this whole thing materialize. Because he's the one who watched his younger brother basically spit in his father's face and say to him, I wish you were dead. He's the one who watched his younger brother cash out the inheritance and take the money and run. He's the one who stayed home while the younger brother went away and squandered their property. He's the one that remained obedient while the younger brother was disobedient. He's the one who had to watch his father day after day, pacing the floor, looking out the window, going out to the front porch, hoping that his son who had betrayed him would finally come home. He's the one who had to watch all that, who had to observe all that, who had to bear the weight of all that. So yeah, says the older brother, I don't exactly see any kind of reason for a party. So here we have this older son standing outside the party. He's kind of kicking rocks around, muttering under his breath. And against that backdrop, something absolutely incredible happens. Don't miss this part of the story. It's in the last part of verse 28. Verse 28 says again, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. Look at this. So his father went out and pleaded with him. First, in this story, the father went to his younger son, and now he goes to his older son as well. The father leaves the party to try to convince his older son to join the party. And in that process, he gives the older son some space to make his case. Verse 29, but he, the older son, answered his father. He said, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your order. Never? Really? You're the perfect kid. First one in history. Exactly. Yet you never gave me even a young goat. He's like, where's the beef, Dad? No young goat for me. And I'm thinking, a goat, really? That's all you wanted was a goat. I've had goat. It's not that great. Okay? That's what you wanted this whole time? You wanted a goat so you could celebrate with your friends. And look, he continues on, verse 30. But when this son of yours, not my brother, but when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes, I'm telling Mom, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. It's Thanksgiving, and this guy has a mouthful. He has a heart full of bitter cranberry sauce. So how does the father respond to these accusations? Look at verse 31. He said, my son. The father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again, and he was lost, and now he is found. And then the older brother has an amazing moment of enlightenment. Look at verse 33. The older son replied, he said, wow, thanks, Dad. I never thought about it like that. I'm such a moron. Can I get you an ice cold lemonade to drink? And then in verse 34, the dad is like, oh, that's my boy. Now go give your brother a hug. Is that what happened? That's the Disney version, right? Is that what happened? Not even close. How's this story actually end? The older son says, you've never given me a goat so my friends and I could party. And the dad responds, he says, but you've always been with me. You've always been with me. You've always been in my presence, and everything I have is yours. Everything is yours already. So come on into the party. Scene. Then it's over. The end. What? No. Why would this happen? Why does Jesus leave this story unresolved? Why does he just leave the Father's words hanging there in midair? I mean, we don't ever get to find out whether this older brother ever decides to join the party. We don't know how it ends, which forces us to ask the question, why would Jesus leave the story like this? Well, I think he leaves this outcome open because the older brother is the inevitable destination for most of us. In fact, one author described the situation this way. He said, one of the hardest things in the world is to stop being the prodigal son without becoming the older brother. And that's the journey for so many of us. That God saves us by grace, but at some point we forget that we are with the Father already and everything that he has is yours and mine. We forget that. So how do we keep from doing that? Well, I think that is the secret sauce of this story. In fact, one of the reasons that I think Jesus ends this parable with the words of the Father is because the Father is actually the hero of the story. You see, the reality is at different points along our journey, many of us will ping pong back and forth between both brothers. A lot of us will be the younger brother and the older brother in our life. At some point, we'll be rebellious, and then we move to being self-righteous, and then we move back to being rebellious and self-righteous in the various aspects of our existence. But here's the secret sauce. The ultimate goal for all of us is not to become like either one of the brothers, but rather for us to become increasingly more like the Father. To become like the Father, welcoming the rebellious and the self-righteous among us into our lives or back into our lives. To become like the Father, living open arms wide and no condemnation, no judgment in our hearts. To become like the Father, offering only love and mercy and grace to those who need it most. In fact, I would argue that one of the ways that you know you've discovered the secret sauce of God's grace is that you are able to welcome home people who have sinned, and even those people who have sinned against you. You see, that's what the Father did for both of his sons. And that's what God has done for each one of us as well. Here's the big idea for today. Although we most likely resemble one or both of the brothers, we should seek to emulate the Father. You see, all of us look like the brothers, but we should strive to be increasingly more like the Father. And so the question that I want to ask as we end this series is simply this: is that true of you? Are you increasingly looking more and more like your heavenly Father when it comes to the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness that he dispenses to us? Are we a reflection of that to others in this world? Is it true of you? If not, it can be. The first step is to turn or return to the Father because he's already running toward you. And the good news is that you can run toward him as well. And when you do, what you will find is that the closer and closer to the Father you run, the more and more like the Father you inevitably become. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for this moment, and we thank you for this story. This story that shows us not just who you are, but who we are as well. God, it's a story that exposes not our actions, but our intentions. It doesn't just expose our behaviors, but it gives us insight into our heart. And the truth is, we all need work there. The good news is that's what you're most interested in. The heart of your children toward you. And so, God, we're so grateful that you are a God who pursues us. And God, we ask that you give us the strength and desire to run toward you as well. Because when we do, our heart becomes like your heart. We look more like you. And God, we thank you again for Jesus and the story he told. And it's in his name we pray. And all God's people said, amen.